This is the Our York Media Podcast, an audio and video production that features the good news makers of York County, Pennsylvania. I'm your host, Rebecca Hanlon. Hey everybody, Matthew Davis is here. But before Matthew and I jump into our conversation, thanks for being here, by the way. Okay, we're going to thank today's sponsor. Today's episode is sponsored by Brewery Products. Brewery Products has been delivering fun since 1965. Join them this holiday season celebrating the designated driver, the most important guest at everyone's party. Volunteering to be the designated driver at any event, delivering us all home safely, will ensure a fun holiday season. Thank you to everyone that has ever or will be a designated driver this holiday. Because of you, there will be a next time. Matthew, thanks for being here.
So happy. That's so great.
So, most people might not necessarily know you from CrocodileDog marketing, which is kind of the umbrella of everything that you do, but they might actually know you more so for a lot of the events that you put on under that. One being, for our audio listeners, they might not realize you're here in a polar bear costume, but for anyone watching video, you're in a polar bear costume.
I am? That was a mistake.
For hibernation.
Yes.
Which will be the next event coming up, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I always have to think about that in case we've decided to
do
run another event in between, which is what happened with hibernation originally. We were just like sitting around at Thanksgiving, I think, and I said, I want to run just a beer event. I just want to go real deep on this. And my business partner was like, whatever, man, you figure it out. And I was like, all right, cool. And then figured it out and sold the whole thing out in like 2 months, and it was good. So that's when life was easy, though.
Okay, so let's back up a smidge. Are you originally from this area?
I'm from York.
You're from York?
Yeah,
okay.
As they say. So I'm not a transplant. Yeah.
Did you always do a mishmash of things, or do beer events? Like, what was your original career idea?
At first I was going to ask how far you wanted to back up.
Right.
The whole idea of a mishmash. It was like, yeah, it was always a big pile of trouble. No, in high school, I moved from one school to the other. And then when you do that, there's kind of three paths. You either just get real awkward, you get real out in front of people, or you get into computers, which is all three of those put together. And so I got into computers right at the time when getting into computers was like the thing to do. And so I went to college for management information systems development, which is a real exciting word I worked with databases and code, which is a super exciting field as well. I did that for a couple years. I worked out at a couple local companies, and I was like their primary person. And then one day I had this weird run-in with my boss up in Harrisburg, where they yelled at me for having a t-shirt on after I spilled mustard on myself. And this was after I had taken over someone's job and taken their 8-hour-a-day efforts and boiled it down to about 20 minutes of scripting, and they weren't happy about it.
Wow.
So they kind of led this little charge against me, and I was like, you know what? I don't like IT anymore. I just don't like, and some other people know that I don't suffer that kind of stuff very well. And so I was just like, no, I'm out. And I went and got my business degree.
Oh.
And even then I had no clue why. I was just like, oh, well, my mom's getting her MBA, so I have to stay at least on par with my mother. And we ended up in the same class once or twice, which was funny. But we, right around that time, which would have been 2008 or 2007, the nonprofit that we were involved in wanted to start doing something different.
Okay.
We were selling sandwiches at car shows and doing pit beef and that sort of thing. And we were just like, this isn't cutting it. I mean, we realized we didn't need money to keep going because we were a program of a much larger nonprofit, but we wanted to do more so that we could build onto the location and renovate it some and things like that. And so we said, let's do a wine festival. We had always been into wine. We were into home winemaking at the time. And we said, let's do this. So we tried it, and it was horrible. It rained so much. There's a picture somewhere that I have of ducks swimming in the middle of the event. No joke. And we learned a lot of things that first year, but that was not my, like, even then I wasn't like, I'm going to do events.
Yeah.
I was just doing a little bit of the graphic design at that time, which accidentally happened because the logo they made was so utterly horrible, and I didn't know why. I just knew my artistic sensibilities were being shot at. So I made a new logo and was like, how about this, guys? Go with this. And then that started me moving from IT and stuff like that over to graphic design. And then graphic design became event planning, and then it became photography, and it became all the other things that I apparently was much more geared towards doing than IT.
So when did it build up from there? So you had that first really bad wine festival.
Yeah, so bad.
But you decided to keep doing it?
Yeah, I don't know why we did that. I think I remember one of the members of the organization at the time gave us like $10,000 to try and pull this off.
Okay.
So he really like believed that we could do this. So he did that, and then I crunched the numbers, as you know, IT nerds tend to do.
Sure,
I love Excel so much. So I put all these things in and said, "Hey guys, I know we just like it seems like this was horrible, and there's a lot of things that would need to change. But if you look at these numbers, like if it hadn't monsooned in the middle of this and we had hit this threshold, it would have made money. Like we were already paying for all of the things. We just weren't making the rest of the money back to in variable costs. So we said, I think if we did this a second year, we could break even. And then every year after this would make us some money. And so we went ahead and did it. And that second year, we actually broke even and then made some money for the organization already. And then it just went from there.
Cool. So when did you start adding some of the other events?
That's a great question. The only way I have of ever answering this is I archive all of my stuff.
Okay.
So when I go into like your Oktoberfest, for example, which was the second event that we created, I can go into the archive folder and it's like, oh, here's posters from blah, 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 blah. And I can see what year. I think it was our third year. The stadium was running some sort of promotion through the YCEA of, hey, use the stadium, blah, blah, blah.
Oh, okay.
And we applied for it, and originally it was called like Wine in the City or something. And then we had gotten the grant, or the whatever it would be called, and started like thinking about it. And that was the first time beer became a thing.
Okay.
We just said, what if we add like beer? What is a beer fest? And there was at that time there was only one, and that was the Farm and Natural Lands Trust event that was happening. And that was different because that was all homebrew. So there weren't really, like retail beer fests were very, very far and few between. So we just reached out to some of the distributors and said, hey, how does this work? And they're like, well, if you get this license, you can do it. And then we got this equipment, and you know, we tried it that first year, and it actually worked really well. So
I attended the first York Oktoberfest.
Oh, so did I. It's weird.
Great
it's
time.
Crazy.
If I remember timing wise with what was like happening in York, and I can't remember exact year, but like Holy Hound would have been fairly new. Like craft beer scene in York wasn't really like that far established, right?
I believe Liquid Hero existed.
Okay.
Crystal Ball was still homebrewing because I remember them coming out. I knew them from the homebrew things that were happening. I think the same year we started was the same year that Brews, Brats, and Bands also started at the baseball stadium, run through the baseball stadium. And other than that, there were no other breweries. I don't even know if the Hound was actually open yet.
Okay,
I think
so you
they
might have been
opened
like before that.
Maybe like, I mean, we're talking 10 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
I feel like Holy Hound's only been around about 6 or 7.
Really?
So yeah, I think it's younger than we think it is.
Time flies.
So yeah, it wasn't very big. You know, York County has, I don't know, 27 breweries now or something crazy. 16 or 27. And there were like 3 at that time. And the homebrew event was like the event. You know, it was the one that we all looked at. It was the one that I looked at as an example. And I said, I want to do more. I want to bring this down to people. So
was it harder to find the vendors or the brewers that you wanted to feature if it wasn't like as popular at that time?
So I don't know if I would have known at that time, my idea of craft beer was still like Sam Adams or Oktoberfest, which there's nothing wrong with it. It's a great beer.
Yeah.
A lot of their stuff is great, and I continue to feature them, you know, for many, many years because they make great stuff. But I didn't drink so much craft beer or get involved with the conversation enough to know that, you know, this is this and this and this and this.
Gotcha.
There were no hype breweries at that time.
Yeah.
It was just the big guys, your Dogfishes and Sam Adams and Blue Points and stuff of the world. So we just, you know, talked to the distributor and said, hey, what can we get out there? And I think at that time we were limited to the contracts that already were established with the baseball stadium. So we were using those distributors so that we could get the product in, it could go into their cooler. And that's a lot of the background that determines what a festival looks like a lot of time that people don't see, is that we have distributors that we have to use and certain mechanics of getting this beer in.
Right.
There isn't just some magical trolley showing up with beer the day of from 20 different breweries that are they're giving us beer. That would be funny for everyone else except me, who has to then individually unload all these beers and shake them up and take them down to the field. So we just took whoever wanted to come out. I don't even know how many people. That first year, I don't remember if we poured or reps from the distributor poured, or I think it was some mix of the between. I remember seeing people, because we had it separate. That was, no one had integrated beer and wine in the same event yet. So we were kind of running an experiment, and we had the wine down on the field and the beer up on the, they have a name for it, but up on, I'm just going to call it the deck or whatever.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until that second year that we like looked at the PLCB laws and really understood. We're like, I think we can license just this part for wine and this part for beer, but they can exist on the same thing so that people don't have to be separated. Yeah. And that's what we did. And then I think we changed up. We added a lot more beer, and we had volunteers coming out and pouring and stuff like that. So,
what would you consider over the years that you've been doing these festivals, like a time that was a failure or something that like it just totally didn't work out?
Every single event. It's not a joke. Without fail, every event there is someone that comes up and is like, "This was great. This was fun.
Sure,
like we had a great time. How do you think it was?" And I'm like, "This was a fire. Like I just spent the whole day putting fires out." And that's, I think if you talk to any successful event planner, you're almost always going to get that answer.
You have to have guts to play.
Yeah, like you are always all in on things, and your job as a good event planner is to find the seams and find those cracks and patch them before everyone else notices them, and then make that note so that next time you can keep it from happening from the start.
Yeah.
And so that's all you see. Like your event is that, you know, you are always trying to make it better. 10 years in, and we've gotten extremely good at breaking down. You know, we had the entire event of your Oktoberfest, which is a one-day large event for 3,000 people, and we had that entire thing packed up, and we were leaving in an hour.
Oh wow!
Like we've just gotten to that point that we can do that, but I still look at that event and say, like, this was a failure. This was a failure. This was a failure. There's always something that we genuinely consider a failure. We recognize that it's good and working, but the two biggest ones that like are by anyone's standard would consider a failure was actually Hibernation Harrisburg.
Okay.
When we did Hibernation the first year, I think we ran it for 2 years, and then we decided to bump it out into other markets. I wanted to like franchise it to myself. So we launched one in Gettysburg, and we launched one in Harrisburg, and we ran an experiment. And that experiment was Harrisburg, we would run and use Groupon. We wanted to max out and sell out that first year and see what kind of people came out. So we ran the Groupon, we did deals, all that stuff. Gettysburg, we didn't.
Okay.
We just said, we're going to leave the price as is, see who shows up. And that first year, the one in Harrisburg, people are coming in, and they are getting a $50 ticket for $20 at that point, something crazy. And so they're drinking for 4 or 5 hours for $20.
Yeah.
And any sane human being would be happy about that. They're like, here are 120 beers, some of them 18%.
Yeah.
You know, Firkin beers, things that were on Randall's, all kinds of crazy stuff, homebrew clubs. And they just came in and complained about everything. It was the most insane negative feedback I've ever had.
Wow.
Meanwhile, at Gettysburg, we go out there, maybe 400 to 600 people show up.
Okay.
You know, we're at about half capacity. And I build the event, no matter what it was, York, Gettysburg, or Harrisburg, I always built it to the same size.
Okay.
I wanted anyone to walk in and say, this is hibernation, not this is the smaller hibernation or this is the bigger hibernation. It's like, I don't care if 300 people show up, I built it for 1,200 people. And so they are all perfectly primed to just get, ripped. Like, you put 300 to 600 people in a system designed for 1,200 people, and I have spreadsheets and formulas that determine this is the number of people, this is the number of breweries, this is the number of the beers, this is how long the average person is going to spend in line waiting for a beer, and we use that to control the consumption of alcohol, along with time releases and other things, because I want them there to enjoy it, not get destroyed in the first hour. So I don't know if I saw a drunk person at that event.
Wow.
And that became sort of the model of what we were trying to do at our events. Is they've never been drinking events. They were always tasting events. And that kind of flew in the face of beer events at the time.
Yeah.
People were always like, yeah, go to this. We don't have to go to a bar crawl tonight. And Gettysburg proved to me that model could work. So it was a success in that regard. In that it proved that the people that I want out at an event are out there, and they're willing to have that conversation with us of like, I like that you brought 4 different beers out in smaller quantities than bringing out 2 beers in big quantities. And the brewers liked that they could be 4 hours into a 5-hour event, and it is that sparsely populated, and no one is coming up and saying, hey, I'll take the whatever has the most alcohol in it, because that is a common mantra for people to talk.
Wow.
So that was a success, but ultimately 2 years after we started both of those, I said, I think we have to cut these because they were like just breaking even. Harrisburg was still making us lose money because it was at a farm show complex, and they were difficult to work with in some regards for that stuff. And I didn't want to do it. Harrisburg I hated. I just straight hated it. Yeah. I just did not like the people that were there. I did not like anything about that entire crowd. So that one was easy to give up. But Gettysburg was hard. I had friends out there. We would go out there. We would stay. We would run the event. We would have fun afterwards. The crowd was amazing. But you're just like, we're spending all this time running this event, and we can't, we could use this to do another event or spend more time making one of our current ones better. Sure. So that was probably the biggest failure. And we are never against admitting
something doesn't work.
Yeah, like I'll talk up a good game all the time. I have to inject a lot of confidence out into the world. But that, I'm always sad about that one. Like, I would have loved to have seen it come back. And it definitely affects our thought process. Like, we've never tried to refranchise one out.
Okay.
Instead we just created new events and we try them in different markets. But what we really learned about that is that York is very unique. It's a little island of, I hate to use the phrase beer connoisseurship. Like, we are geeky about beer here. Yeah. And we are curious about beer here. There's a great crowd in the entire spectrum of beer drinking that is looking to get started on like their journey of drinking beer. And because of those people, we had a sit down once and I looked at all the events that we were running and I was like, where does this fit on that spectrum? And it helped guide the breweries I would invite and the way that I would choose beer for that event and the way that it was presented to people. And it was, hibernation is at the end, was at the end of the geeky side where you're like, there are so many cool beers here, I don't even know where to start. Whereas things like your Oktoberfest is right in the middle. Okay. It's a wine, it's beer, and I get some nerdy stuff there, but for the most part, I want people coming out and just trying beer. Yeah. I want them to try and find some style. Like most of the events, I I custom pick every one of the beers that's there and say, I want you to bring this, I want you to bring this. That way I don't end up with 400 sour cucumber cranberry saisons, that are cloudy or whatever people are making today. I was like, hey, you have a Schwartz beer? That's great. Bring that out. You have a Weizenbach, you have a, Hefeweizen. You get your Martins and stuff and your Hefeweizens that time of year, and that's seasonal. But I want to make sure anyone can come out for their first time or their 500th time and find something. And that's what we learned out of hibernation. Those 2 failures told us that this exists here. The people in Gettysburg, for better or worse, like, that's a drinking crowd. You look at the events that work really well out there. They're in the summer. They're feeding off of the tourism that's already there. And when you go out there, there's sometimes just people like laying on the ground. They're having a fun time, and that's great. And, you go up to Harrisburg, it's the same thing. They're just like, hey, we don't have to do a bar crawl. Look how much I can get for $20. But we knew right from the beginning, like, we are working with a nonprofit. We have to shield them from that kind of liability, because if we are serving intoxicated patrons, especially visibly intoxicated patrons, it breaks all the barriers of liability. And, if the PLCB shows up, we would just never get an SOP again. So, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be known for that. So,
why do you think York, you mentioned that we've kind of become this like mini epicenter for craft beer, and we like it and we want to try new things and people experiment. Why do you think that works here?
I don't know, man. I have no answer for that. I know we've had this conversation for multiple reasons, like why did so many breweries, we have 6 breweries and 1.1 walking miles. Like, why did that happen? It wasn't some economic advantage. It wasn't, we had some strong homebrew club stuff in the last decade. There are still 2 very good, strong homebrew clubs in York. Great people. I don't think I have an answer. I think it's the people that decided to live here. Ultimately, they're close enough that they could go to Pittsburgh, they could go to Baltimore, they could go to DC, they could go to Philly, but they like being here in the middle of it all, but outside of it all. And I think everyone needs those quality of life, escape things. They want to watch movies, they want to drink, they want to go to bars, they want to go to dinner. And so we have a great restaurant life here in York, in downtown York, and we have a good food life, or not food life, drink life. I think the breweries just filled in that gap between, hey, I'm in college and I want to go down to blah, 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 and I want to drink some beer, to I don't want to sit around and drink wine and smell figs and, the sound that the wine's making in my ear. I just want to drink something, and I want it to taste good. And that's what I want for my evening. And I think it's a cultural, just from the ground up kind of thing, that it's an emergent trait, I believe, of the area.
So a couple of years ago, you guys took over what started as Foodstruck, rebranded it as What the Food Trucks. And it's, you serve beer at that event, but it's largely a food truck event. Why take that on? It seems like it's a little different from some of the other things. How did that fit into the scope of what you were doing, that you decided to make that leap?
That event was more of a personal, I don't know, words are failing me now, but the rest of them we were doing because we just wanted to do events, and we wanted to help out the nonprofit, their mission, all the blah, 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 blah. That event, by that time, I had been getting involved in the downtown crowd. I think we may have already launched, we had been in the process of launching the Pretzel Company. I had tried to start a co-working space. I was downtown all the time doing all kinds of crazy stuff. And this idea of, the food trucks, what food truck became, was something that we all believed in. Like, we wanted to live here. We wanted to make York a better place. We could all move. We could go to the cool cities around the country, but we all were like, no, we want to live here, and we want to make this the place that we want to live, instead of going somewhere else that's already the place we want to live. And food trucks were a big part of that. You know, it was a cultural thing. It was a food thing, and it was part of a tapestry that needed to exist that didn't exist. So that's why it came about, even though I wasn't involved in its initial creation. Because we had a bunch of festival gear, you know, our library of stuff. That second and third event, because there were 2 a year for a while, we like lent them stuff, big tents, because it of course always rained. Yeah. So we broke out all the tents and some other things that we lent them. And then once I got more involved, it was, you know, they were footing the bill. The individual people running that were footing the bill. And so we said, hey, why don't we lend you the stuff and foot the bill, and you guys just plan the event. So I think the second to last year, that's what we did. And then we were, you know, actively involved at that point. At least I was in the event. And we just knew that it needed to grow, or could grow. It didn't need to grow, but it was going to grow.
Potential, yeah. And
so we had walked around the city looking for spots. I remember walking around with Philip Given and Meg at the time, and some other people, Jordan. And we were like, where can this go? What's a cool spot? And I remember looking at the Northwest Triangle, and we looked at a couple other spots. The only thing we knew was we wasn't going to move out of the city. Like we weren't going to move to the fairgrounds or something like that. And I was just sitting there at my desk and looking at an aerial view of York, which is how I make most of my event maps. And I was like, what's this big green area? And I just zoomed down in, and I was like, oh, Penn Park. This is huge. This is massive. Yeah. It's like a block and a half by a block and a half. Yeah. It's like 750 feet on one side. Really, so it's massive. And I had never, like, I knew I'd driven by it. I'd never been there. So I remember taking a screenshot and sending it to the group. And I was like, guys, like, we're sitting here constantly talking about how great York is, how it doesn't really have a parking problem. It just has a perception problem. How there is so much good in this city that people don't see, and we're preaching it every day. And right here is our one chance. Like, this is an opportunity. And I remember writing that long email, just trying to convince them, because I knew I could always tell when I was about to fight an uphill battle, which is pretty much when I wake up. And that one, I knew I was going to struggle. Yeah. To even for a downtown group of people. And I said, this is our chance. Like, we have a chance to move all these people into a park that people say is unsafe, into a city with a parking problem. And, like, we can do it. And so they eventually were like, yeah, let's do it. And so I created the new maps. We got very involved. We did that. And I think it was still food struck for 1 year there, maybe 2 years. Okay. We had all but taken it over by the end. Like, we were running the stuff. The trucks were still running through the Ensmingers and stuff. And, but we wanted to make sure that they were just loose to make the event everything it could be. And that's when we added the beer to it, to try and help pay for some of the bills and, again, raise funds for the nonprofit we were working with. So
you added the beer for food struck to help offset some of the costs.
Yeah, so we did that. You know, it was still always an event. Like, even by then, you would imagine, like, we were pulling out 15 to 18,000 people. It still never got a lot of funding. I mean, we did not pull in sponsors. It was just one of those things that, for as many good things that happen in York, one of the bad things is people assume that if it's happening, it must be doing fine. So it's hard when you have a group of people that are capable of doing that on shoestring budgets, doing something and making something that big happen. Yeah. And people, if you would ask people like, hey, how much sponsorship money do you think supported this? They'd be like, oh man, it must be, $20,000 in sponsorship. Or we'd have people get online and say, these people are running away with all this money. And you're like, what are you talking about? Like, there are 18,000 people here and we are still losing money because it's free. Like, where do you think the money is coming from that we have to pay for all this stuff? And I think, like, even with us footing the bill, the people who were running it they were just getting tired. They wanted to move on to other projects. They wanted to do some other things. And so, I'd always said, like, when you want to be done, like, we can officially take this over. And so all the politics followed after that of however that worked out. And so Food Struck died, and we started a new event with, a different name there at the same time. It was all the same. But we wanted to kind of create a hard stop to Food
Gotcha.
Struck and do this. That way it had some freedom to do some other things.
Okay.
So I don't remember the original question. I hope I answered it. Okay.
I think we're good. I think
All
you
right,
covered
excellent. Good.
it. I'm curious what you think some of these events have done for York. Especially with some of the beer events early on, you were bringing in home brewers that now have their own brick and mortar bars. You were exposing them to people that maybe they otherwise would never have had a chance to be like, this is our craft. Do you want to try it? Or even some of the events in a, being with the food trucks in Penn Park, like what does that do for that neighborhood in that area? So I'm curious what you think, like bigger ripple effect the events have.
I don't like this question at all.
Sorry.
This is
A little too personal.
no, I'm not it's I'm gonna have to look at the
You want to look at the numbers in the
well, no, I do love numbers. I love numbers so much. But I feel like I almost have to toot our horn in order to answer this question.
Sure,
I'm not
a
usually a
little bit,
big fan of that. I love bragging about stuff, but not this for some reason. I think the impact on the beer scene is tangible. I don't know where it's tangible, but I believe that if all of these events weren't happening in York, the beer landscape would look different. Okay. I don't know how much different. I don't know what our actual impact was. I know Gift Horse I remember that very first meeting. I met with him at co-work. Someone said, hey, here's this guy. He's got some beer. He'd like to blah, blah, blah. And I was like, all right, well, I try the beer. If it's good, if it's drinkable, we'll give you some feedback and we'll put you in front of people. Because I still wanted to make sure that even homebrew, I wanted to make sure people were making good beer and putting it in front of people. Yeah. So he came over, gave me a bunch of beer, and I was like, this is your winner. Like, make more of this, make more of this. And I said, this one's not great. He knew it, but it was a fun meeting. It was great. We drank a lot of beer and talked about it. And then he came out to the Oktoberfest that year. And that was the first year we did like a best People's Choice award. Yeah. And he actually won. He made those beers and they did very well. And he's a very personable guy. And so he proceeded to come out to events for 5 years. Wow. Before he finally got the brewery up and running. There's a lot of junk to get a brewery running. But I know I'd be willing to bet that if the events didn't exist, he probably wouldn't have ended up with, it kept him in front of people for 5 years. And he proceeded to win, I think he won Brew Kids on the Block 2 or 3 years, one or the other award. And he was a home brewer, he's showing up, other people. Collusion, they would have done their thing regardless. But, we're always making sure that they're out there. I know Crystal Ball was starting when we were all starting the events, but they were always there pouring that coconut porter with chunks of coconut, pouring out of the picnic tap. I think it made a tangible impact. Yeah. Culturally, that's the one I would be more proud of. I don't think the events, other than what the food truck, have made any real difference on the city, other than just giving it more quality of life that's here at home. But I do believe food truck and what the food trucks have made some sort of tangible change in the fabric of the town, in the conversation that we can have about events and about event safety and how many people can come out to an event and not complain. Like I said, it's 20,000 people. We had 20,000 people this year, and it was all of them were in that park, and it was easily the most diverse event I have ever been to in York. And I had many people come up and say that exact thing, where they're like, there is a crowd here I've never seen. That's awesome. Together in one place. And they were playing basketball, and we've gotten just enough sponsors, so we were moving things off of basketball courts and making room for people to bring in community and just do everything. It was a wonderful mixing pot. Yeah. And no one got on and said, oh, it's not safe there. And none of them said, hey, I can't find a place to park. It was great. And I love that every year. I wish it wasn't such a struggle in many regards, but it's worth it every year when we go there and we see it. And it's one of the very few times where, like, in the middle of the event, we have just stopped and said, like, this is a good thing, you know. And I don't feel like that often. I just think, we're like, cool, we did this, but it's our job, you know.
Yeah.
But that one's not our job. That is our, like, passion project that somehow just keeps getting out of hand. But I think that's the one that made the difference.
Yeah, that's cool. What's going to be new? What's upcoming that you've not done before?
Well, we bought the ruins down in Glen Rock.
Yeah, that's exciting.
So we're rebranding that backwards. It used to be called Ruins Hall.
Okay.
So we're taking it back to that because it's easier name. I own the domain as opposed to Ruins Park was already taken. I think we own Ruins Park, but there was another one called the Ruins that we were considering.
Okay.
But for some reason it was called Ruins Hall, and we have a problem with people thinking that it's like a public park. So changing it from Ruins Park to Ruins Hall tries to help with that a little bit. So we're trying to use that to do more like test events, just little tiny pop-up cool things that we've always wanted to try, of which I have a very long list of really insane things that I want to try down there. And then if we can make it generate a little bit of money through weddings or whatever we can try and do, I want to open it up for like other people that just want to run events. Where you're like, hey, do you have a crazy idea, but you can't find a venue to do this? Like, come out here. Like, first year's on us. Just try it.
That's cool.
Just do something cool.
Yeah.
Because that one's uniquely positioned that it can pull from both York and, you know, the entire Maryland crowd.
Sure.
So we want to see more things happen there. So Brew Kids will be separating off of Taste of PA this year.
Okay.
It was traditionally just done that evening, which was not great for those of us running it. So we're going to move that down to the Ruins, and it's going to be a like full-on 90s like crazy party. So we're going to do that, and I don't think we've officially announced it yet, but it's in the sponsorship brochure, and I sat down and made like a logo for it.
That's official enough.
That's official enough, yeah. I mean, it's out there somewhere. It's just we didn't tell people. I'm going to be working with Vic from Brewery Products and some other, you know, breweries to do a hard seltzer festival. Hard seltzer is what I'm calling it, but it's really it's everything that's just not beer.
Okay.
It's called Helter Seltzer.
Fun.
And I think the tagline is like Festival Life Beyond Beer or something like that. For Life Beyond Beer, that's what it is. So I'm excited about that one. I mean, we're just going to pick the hottest day in July. I think it's July 11th or 18th or whatever.
For seltzer.
And I want people to be dying in here, but we're going to have like water battles and like
That's
I want to
cool.
have an ice luge and just find like cool, fun ways to do stuff. So we're going to do that. And there's a number of other crazy events that we're working on. We were trying to do a Viking festival on the exact opposite of that. Like I want to find what day it's going to snow. And then
everybody coming in first.
Yeah, I was like, we're going to have a crazy, it's theme only. You have to have furs. You have to just be like, and the ticket price will be higher, but that's something that if you own the venue, you can try weird stuff like that.
Sure, yeah.
And I think we can get 100 people out or 300 people out that just want to do this. Like, hey, we got this pig on a spit and we got a bunch of open fires. And it was like, you have to sign 3 pages worth of liabilities and general waivers to get into this thing. And people will just do it, you know, because we want those kind of events. I want to go to those kind of events. I want to have fun in something like that.
Yeah.
And we're working on a smoked meats festival. I don't know if I'm allowed to say the name of that one out loud here.
Okay.
It's called,
Oh, it might get bleeped.
it's not a curse word.
Oh. Is it appropriate?
Well, I mean, it's called the Great American Jerk Off.
Okay.
Because it's jerked meats and smoked meats, and it'll be fun. I think that one will be great. People want some of that stuff. And we're working on a fall festival. It's going to be boxed wine and pumpkin spice and Uggs and all
You're
that
just gonna play into
crowd.
it.
I don't think I can say the B word, so I can't say that one. But I just want to play into, and I've already talked to a couple people that are just like embodying that
Gotcha.
way of life. And I was like, what do you want here? You were like, I want 30 vendors and 29 of them need to be LuLaRoe. That's what I want,
Wow.
So just different LuLaRoe vendors and spiced wine. So it's going to be fun. I mean, you just lean into it. Just have fun. That's the thing. I don't want to run big events. I don't want 20,000 people. I was going to say, you can probably get like even Hibernation is 1,200 people, and I kind of max it 12 to 1,500 people, and that's all I want.
Yeah.
I want the small niche, just fun.
Yeah.
Just really lean into it. Find someone who knows everything about that, and just say, what would you do?
Yeah.
Like, use us as the tool for this event to exist, and get the people there, and just call it.
That's cool.
I want to have fun. So
I like it.
I think that answered the question.
Yeah. Excellent.
Good.
Very exciting.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's really cool that you've tried things. I think it's funny in some ways. You consider most of them to be failures, but you keep doing them and keep coming up with new ideas. I mean, I think it's really exciting what you do.
I'm glad someone does. It's so much effort.
All right. Well, Matthew, thank you for your time and for coming on to talk to us about what you do.
Excellent. Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening. For more information on Our York Media and our Good News Initiative, you can visit ouryorkmedia.com. We appreciate your attention and give bonus points for those who subscribe. We want to thank Brewery Products for sponsoring this episode. The Our York Media podcast is produced by Will Hanlon and Ken Brueggemann. I'm Rebecca Hanlon. Thanks so much for listening.